What is demand? Now, demand is defined as the willingness and ability of a consumer to purchase a particular good or service at a given price. Now, there are few important things to note here. It is the willingness and the ability of a consumer to purchase a good and service at a given price. Therefore, the consumer has to be willing to purchase this product and able to pay the price in order to get the service or good. And now, who is a consumer? A consumer is the individual who demands for goods and services to fulfill their needs and wants. Now, we all know that our needs are very basic, they are the essentials to sustain life, and they are common among everyone, like food, water, shelter, and clothing. Wants, on the other hand, are sophisticated and it is very subjective and it changes depending on the person's tastes and preferences. For example, it could be that you want to eat pizza or some fried rice, you want to wear a nice suit. It could be that you want to be living in a condo or an apartment. So, those become your wants. Therefore, consumers have both needs and wants that they have to fulfill. And in order to fulfill their needs and wants, they would demand for certain goods and services. And those who demand for goods and services to fulfill their needs and wants are called consumers, just like you and me. Now, one very important thing to note is that consumers would be more willing and able to buy goods and services at a cheaper price. Consumers by nature would like to get more by paying less. And this is the law of demand. The law of demand says keeping all other factors constant, our ceteris paribus condition. We keep everything else constant. We see a negative relationship between price and quantity demand, which means when price increases of the product, the quantity demanded of that product will decrease. And if the price decreases of a particular product, quantity demand of that particular product will increase. That is the law of demand. Now, in a demand schedule, a table which shows the prices and the respective quantities, we will see as price increases from 0 to 40, you see the quantity demand decreases from 100 to 20. So at the lowest price 0, when it's given for free, there's 100 units demanded. But when the price increases to 10, you see the quantity demand has fallen by 20 here. Therefore, the demand schedule shows that when price increases, quantity demand decreases. And the same can be shown on a curve, a graph where we see a downward sloping demand curve. We see when price increases from P1 to P2, our quantity has decreased from Q2 to Q1. So when our price increases, we see from this point we move on to this point here, which shows a quantity decrease from Q2 to Q1. This shows a negative relationship. So keep in mind very clearly that a demand curve will always be a downward sloping curve. Now, there are two things that happen to demand curves. One would be movements along the demand curve. The second would be shifts. First, we will focus on movements along the demand curve. Movements such as from A to B or B to A will only happen due to a change in price. So, when price decreases from P2 to P1, we will see a movement from A to B causing a increase in our quantity demand from Q1 to Q2. So a movement along the demand curve is only caused by a change in the price of that good. So once again, quantity demand only changes due to price, and this is quantity demand. And then you have shifts of the demand curve. The demand curve could shift outwards or inwards. Outwards would be from D1 to D2. inwards would be from D1 to D3. And you will see at the same price P1, when the demand curve shifts to when the demand curve shifts from D1 to D2, our quantity changes to Q2. And here at the same price, when our demand curve shifts from D1 to D3, the quantity changes to Q3. Now this is a shift of the demand curve. There is no relevance of the price. There is no impact of the price. But some other factors change and cause this kind of demand curve to move. Now let's first talk about an outward shift. If it is an outward shift, we see at the same price, the curve shifts outwards from D1 to D2. Now this causes the quantity to increase. Therefore, we consider this as an increase in demand, or the demand increases. Now, what kind of factors would impact demand to increase in an economy? Goods and services will see an increase in its demand if the population increases. Let's say if you were a family of 2 and then you have 3 more children coming into your family, the population of your family has increased. Therefore, the amounts that you demand, or your demands for different goods and services, will also increase. So population increase causes an increase in demand. Increase in income. Now increase in income causes an increase in demand for normal goods, such as necessities or luxuries. So necessities such as our essentials like rice or dal in a Sri Lankan family. It could be soap, our basic essentials. The demand for such essentials would increase when our income increases. Or luxuries like an expensive wristwatch. When your income increases, you will have an increase in demand for such exclusive products. But for goods like inferior goods, when our income decreases, we will increase our demand for inferior goods. For example, inferior goods are goods such as, let's take public transportation. Someone would have used public transportation all through their life, but because of an increase in income, they would have switched to using a private mode of transportation. So public transportation becomes a service that you have been using because your income was low. So in this case, when your income further decreases, you will further increase your demand for inferior goods such as public transportation. So two things that you have to remember here. Increase in income increases demand for normal goods. Decrease in income increases demand for inferior goods. Another is the fall in price of a complementary good. Now, if a good is in complementary relationship, we know that they are consumed together. So, if we take something like milk and tea, when the price of tea falls, consumers will demand for more tea. And because they are demanding for more tea, they will also increase their demand for the complementary good, which is milk. So nothing happened to the price of milk, but just because the price changed of tea, there will be an increase in demand for milk as well. The fifth point is the rise of the price in substitute goods. Let's take Pepsi and Coca-Cola, for example, or tea and coffee. These kind of goods are in substitute relationship. You will have one or the other. You can easily substitute each other. Now, in such cases, when the price of Pepsi increases, you will no longer want to demand for Pepsi. You will switch to your substitute, which is Coca-Cola. Or if your price of tea increases, you will no longer want to demand for tea. You will switch to coffee. So because your substitute's price increased, the good that you are looking at will also be increased in demand. That is the relationship between substitute goods and the impact on its demand. Other than that, we also see successful advertising campaigns or marketing campaigns where it promotes and stimulates people's interest to purchase a particular product, will increase the demand. Changes in tastes and preferences, trends and fashion over time will also increase demand for certain goods and services. Changes in climate or weather conditions. Now we know in the Western world there are seasons. When seasons change from, let's say, summer to winter, we will see people's demand increases for winter clothing and decreases the demand for summer clothing, and vice versa when the seasons change. So these are factors that impact demand to increase, showing an outward shift of the demand curve. Just like an outward shift, the curve can shift inwards as well. Now an inward shift will cause a decrease in demand. And the same factors would impact a decrease in demand, a fall in the population, a fall in the income causing a decrease in demand for necessities and luxuries, an increase in income causing an increase in demand for inferior goods. There should be a correction here. Increase in income will show a decrease in demand for inferior goods, and rise in the price of a complementary good, fall in the price of a substitute good, or changes in tastes and preferences, climate and weather conditions. All these factors impact demand to decrease. Now once again there's a typo here. Increase in income will decrease demand for inferior goods, because when you earn more and more, you will no longer want your inferior goods. When you earn more, you will resort for private transportation and not public transportation. And public transportation is your inferior good. So, mind you, there is a typo here. This should be decrease in demand for inferior goods. So, likewise, all these factors can impact your demand to decrease. Now, demand can be changed due to all these factors that we just discussed. Now, it is very important to note there's a difference between changes in quantity demand and changes in demand. Changes in quantity demand happens only because of changes in price, and this is shown as a movement along the demand curve, like we saw. Changes in demand happens due to many factors excluding price. Price does not impact towards a change in demand, and this is shown as a shift of your demand.